to Blerdlines. This is your man Cam. With me as always is
the other Cam, the last actually Negro, the Woko Kaji, the most respected hater on the planet Earth and the galaxy.
As well as...
Hey, yo, this is Josh, a.k.a. the Dark Lord of the Caribbean Sith, known as Darth Coconut.
And always trying to keep us a little bit more villainy.
This is Lord Professor D of the House Morgoth, second of my name, speaker of the nerds, scourge of imbeciles, and breaker of pop culture and mediocre chains.
We unfortunately have to talk about something, elephant in the room. Section 31. And the reason why I'm bringing this up now, because once we talk about it now, we never have to talk about it and speak about it again. As diehard Star Trek fans, it's one of those things that we were actually excited about. And one of those things where we're like, oh, this is cool. We got Michelle Yeoh, we got Star Trek, we got Section 31. There's a lot of promise. They dragged their feet because it was going to be a TV show, but it turned into a movie because she won an Oscar. And then she was like, yo, I like the character. I'll come back and do it because I like y'all. I want to do something.
And I'll take that increased check that you're going to pay me this time around that you weren't going to pay me before.
100%. Wait, you have to pay me now.
Can I say something before you guys go into this? Because I am the non-Star Trek guy in this room. I do finally remember you guys being super excited
100%.
that this was happening, that Michelle Yeoh should have been signed pre-Oscar hype, and then she was signed, which further indicated that you guys were like, okay, we got Michelle Yeoh, she's dope, I'm into it. You guys are pretty pumped about this. And to hear that you guys are like, yo, this is buns, is like, wow.
What's interesting is how much preamble or prologue goes into what we got. And I think it's also interesting that this happened again with The Witcher, where she's in a movie or a story that was an expansion of a different property, and they completely dropped the ball with her and who she is and what she brings to the table. But here we have a situation where they miffed on it pre her winning the Oscar. They sat on it. Obviously, COVID interfered, and so that ended up pushing it back. And then we finally get it, and it's completely not what anybody wanted. I mean, I think I might have died a little bit on the inside as a Star Trek fan by the time that this thing was over with. I mean, I couldn't believe what this was or what this became. Josh pointed it out head on. There is nothing about this that is spy thriller, that is even remotely close to what Section 31 is understood to be or established as having been in the Star Trek universe. And not only that, they spend about 30% of the time in space on an actual starship. The rest is spent on some derelict planet that looks like it was like the backdrop set of one of Snyder's Rebel Moon crappy films. That's how bad that film is. So I don't know. The whole time I was thinking it took me literally 3 tries to get through the whole film. I stopped it 3 times at 3 separate points. Maybe in every act, I stopped it. Act 1, by the time I got to the end and realized it was apparent by the time I entered Act 2 that this is the equivalent of a really bad 3-part episode of Star Trek Discovery. It took all the worst aspects of the new age of Star Trek and combined them and put them in a 1 hour, close to 2 hour film. And I was amazed at that. They even had things in there that was just like, oh, you remember the original series with the characters with the half white, half black face. Here they are. It was just one Trek thing after the next, but not done in any kind of way that enhanced the franchise, that told a good solo story. I just couldn't. The whole time I'm thinking, who watched this and said, yes, that's what we wanted. That's the Section 31 we wanted. It made me feel like there's literally nothing to look forward to in the future for Star Trek.
Deep sigh. Deep sigh. Josh, you watched it as well. I have not watched it. And this was, as everyone was starting to watch it, I was kind of like, oh yeah, Section 31. And then D'Angelo was the first one. He was like, nah, don't do it. And then Josh was like, oh, I'll watch it in a little bit. And then a little bit later, nah, don't do it. And then my other faithful Star Trek people, they're just like, I know you're going to watch it at some point, but don't. Just don't.
Don't waste your time unless you have absolutely nothing to do. I mean, as a fan of Michelle Yeoh, maybe. But beyond that, I don't think you're going to get much out of it. I mean, Josh and I kept joking, asking, what's her name, Josh? The Starfleet officer? Oh, God.
Rachel Garrett.
What is Garrett doing there? We kept asking, why is she there? The whole point of Section 31 is that so Starfleet and the Federation does not get their hands dirty. The only time they brought in a Starfleet officer were specific times, and specifically in Deep Space Nine when they brought in Bashir. And even that was very complicated, and it was dubious at best. He couldn't prove it was happening, and it took a whole lot of effort for them to even capture or actually entrap the agent who was his handler. This is like, man, I don't even know. I mean, Josh got a lot to say about it too, so I'll let him go ahead and chime in.
Oh, look at the face.
All right, so picking up where D'Angelo left off, like it's just because I don't even know where to begin, so I'll just start there. But basically, the whole point. So starting with when they first introduced Section 31 is on Deep Space Nine, and for some reason or the other, as much of a stretch as it is on paper, they make it work on screen. You know, they decide that Julian Bashir, the chief medical officer in Deep Space Nine, would make a good recruit for Section 31, and so they test him. What would he do given a situation if blah 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 happened, and he's pressed to either reveal his secret, keep his secret, let the mission play out, whatever it is. And so, though he thwarts Section 31's sort of fictitious efforts in their in the simulation that they run him through, the main guy for what we assume is the main guy in Section 31. Says, you know what, you have the makings of a good operative. And so, like it or not, even though it's dubious how you did in this simulation, we'll be back because I think we're going to have the use for you somewhere later on down the line. So a year passes, and he goes to this conference, and Section 31 basically sort of has the Dominion War has started, and there's a medical conference that's a joint effort between the Romulans and the Federation. And so Section 31 takes this opportunity to infiltrate the conference and get at somebody who is who in the Romulan government to take out somebody who seemingly is a good person and wants right to prevail. I'm not going to get into the details, but also to bolster a spy that Section 31 has in the Romulan Senate, which is just mind-blowing in and of itself. And so they dig into, in that episode, how Starfleet does not have dealings. So this is the thrust of the show, of the concept of Section 31, and it's to show how blatantly they disregarded it in the movie. There's a scene between Bashir and an admiral. And so Bashir figures out, you just magically disappeared. Like, I think the thing was he was supposed to have had an aneurysm. And he was like, it's curious that once Sloan, who's the Section 31 agent in the episode, once Sloan is revealed to be a Section 31 agent, you magically have an aneurysm. Like legit, they said he had an aneurysm, like to take him off the board. And so he was taken off the board because once Section 31 is in play, Starfleet can't be around. Like Starfleet can't have any dealings. They can't have sanction because it'll be perceived as sanctioning their existence and sanctioning their actions conceptually. Yep. And so he's like, yeah, I ain't gonna lie, I was off the board because Section 31 was doing their thing, so I can't be around. And so, you know, Julian goes on this holier than thou diatribe before the episode's over, and you know, oh, this is very anti-Federation, yada yada yada. That's how Section 31 moves. They're perceived to be very anti everything that the Federation stands for. And
that's so, the whole point of Section 31. They're essentially
all the dirty crap that props up the Federation and their values and their ability to be squeaky, you know, the squeaky clean utopia. While Section 31 is in the background doing dirt.
Yeah, to make they circumvent all of that. And it's like the CIA, but only a much deeper, more clandestine arm of the government. And the whole point of it, to add to Josh's point about it debuting in Deep Space Nine, Deep Space Nine was the show that kind of broke away from all of the Roddenberry, the Roddenberry's sort of key rules about the Federation and Starfleet and how they operate. And so when it was introduced, it's even talked about and deconstructed on the show. I think it was Odo who was like, yeah, it surprised me more to learn to think that the Federation does not have a clandestine espionage program or ring like the Obsidian Order for the Cardassians, or the what's the Romulan one called?
Tal Shiar.
The Tal Shiar of Romulus. So it became a huge thing because it was completely against all of the lore that had been established about the Federation, about Starfleet. And so when you get to this movie, all of that has been completely stripped away from what Section 31 is.
Yes. Yeah. And so, you know, they don't, to D'Angelo's previous point, they don't really think, but like there's no trace of any of that in this film. It just seems like, you know, a bunch of guys who got together and, you know, they feel more like subcontractors, like mercenaries who went out and did a thing, but there's no spy aspect. There's no intrigue. There's no clandestine anything even remotely related to what happens in this movie.
There was something else that was disturbing, Josh, to add to that, which was Section 31. If they had come in contact with a weapon like what they were dealing with in that film, their goal might be to stop it, but their ultimate goal would be to get that.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
And get it for the Federation. And even if they never used it, they would take it and have it. And that would have been the goal. And somebody would have, most likely Starfleet, which is why we kept saying, Josh and I, why is Garrett there? What is she doing there?
Right.
Because she's supposed Starfleet, and they made it specific to note that Starfleet assigned her to that. That is not how this works in the lore.
And again, in just 2 episodes, forget what they do in Discovery. And Discovery handles, there's no shade on Discovery, because this was the sweet spot in Discovery where Section 31 shows up. And they handle Section 31 in Discovery very well. But in the two episodes that I mentioned before of Deep Space Nine, they established pretty early on and in very concrete terms that Starfleet has no dealings, and they don't even have, like, the Federation, Starfleet, no oversight. None whatsoever. With
even
Section 31.
most of the high command is not even aware of the existence of Section 31. Cisco,
I think they said something like the Federation president doesn't even know it exists.
Even Cisco, all of them, they were just as baffled by the notion of the existence of an espionage ring within the Federation as Bashir was, as he was discovering it. And it took a while for them to even be able to prove it, to entrap Sloan. And that took a lot. And even when they captured him, there were fail safes that ensured that
on top of fail safes
that ensured that they would never be able to present that evidence before the Federation at all. And by the time they got there, somebody in Section 31 would clean it up, because that's just how it worked. But again, this film, there's nothing of the sort like that at all. Not even remotely close to it. It's as bad as what The Witcher Blood Origins was in terms of all of that.
The title of this pod is gonna be the pod about meh.
So let me understand this real quick before you guys go on.
Let me just clarify real quick. It's worse than meh. It's bad. It was a bad movie. It was done in bad faith. It looks like something. It looks like something that began as a great idea, with the trappings of all the things that Deep Space Nine and Discovery touch on, where Section 31 is concerned. And some executive came in and said, "Let's make it about this instead." Because the writers who write on Discovery, of the current present day writers that are prevalent in most of present day Star Trek, only Olatunde Osunsame and Alex Kurtzman are involved in this thing. The other writers, I have no idea who, and Gene Roddenberry. Other than them, I have no idea who the rest of these people are. And there's like 6 other people that have a writing credit on this thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people. So there's 5 other people who had a hand in writing this thing that, in my opinion, had no business touching any of it.
Can I add something real quick from a guy looking from the outside in? You mean to tell me that they created a Star Wars franchise that deal with like Black Ops, clandestine spy shit, and it turned out bad? In addition, I looked up the cast. I didn't know the actor from Power was in this. Like, what the heck? I would have never thought
Amari Hardwick. Terrible. Listen, he's not terrible.
I'm not saying he was.
No, I didn't say you did. Sorry.
But the thing is, I'm just surprised to see him in this.
They don't give him anything to do. But I think he could have been good in the role if they actually gave him something worth watching.
So here's the thing. You had all this and it failed. How?
It's exactly as I said. I don't recognize over half the writers. I only recognize 3 writers.
So I would have been interested in this because I am somewhat familiar with Star Trek lore. And this seems like something, this is something totally new based on how I remember the old Star Trek and some of the contemporary Star Trek TV shows. I ain't never heard about no spy, like a series based on spy and clandestine undercover work. I would have been.
It's 9 episodes to watch, bro. They're among the best of the series.
So just to hear that they're going to focus on this primarily, I, being not a Star Trek fan, would have been more interested in this to get me back into the series. And you're telling me it's bad.
It's completely dropping the ball for what they had. They had something that could have been a launch of the new age of Star Trek films. Because remember, there was always a tradition of Star Trek playing out on TV. In fact, if you want to talk about the MCU doing the sort of TV film crossovers and things like that, they got a little bit of that from Star Trek and how Star Trek threaded their movies and TV together very well. At least the big major plot points for many years. This was an opportunity to pick up that tradition, and they completely buffed it. They don't justify any real reason why they're after Emperor Georgiou. They try to create a really they try to establish her, since she's the protagonist, as being more human than what we remember her being as the Terran emperor. And it doesn't work because it's not well thought out. It's very one-dimensional in its efforts. And it also has nothing to do with understanding why she would fit well in Section 31. That's the biggest part that they dropped, is they don't justify. We don't even hear how she actually arrived. We know from Discovery season 3 that I forgot the name of the character. Josh can fill that in. But
Guardian on the Edge of Forever.
Yes, that entity takes her somewhere in space and time. We assume, because they had already established that they were getting ready to do that, it was going to be a show at first, and then it became the movie, that they took her back to her space and time, which would only make sense because she really, technically, she's not supposed to be able to exist in another space and time. The scientifically, the tachyon radiation would either age her up to dust, or it would completely destroy her body either way it goes. So taking that, we assume that he had to take her back to where she could exist and live. We don't know why he takes her to that point, why he dropped her off, and what she's been doing. We get a little brief about it, but it doesn't add up or make any logical sense. Now, I will say this: there's one good thing that I liked, and that was Jamie Lee Curtis' cameo as Control. And I thought that was fun, and I liked it because it was Michelle Yeoh saying, "Hey, they want me to do this Section 31 movie. Come on over, get you a role.
Pull up.
Come on, pull up. And everybody will love it. And whatever happens, we get paid, and we still Oscar winners." That's why I loved it.
Yeah, I had to do some digging too, because I was like, all right, there's got to be a reason why this is a mess, right? So one, the director is Black dude from he did a bunch of episodes on Discovery. And then two, the creator, he already has a negative for me because he created Watson with Morris Chestnut. That's already a negative.
Let's not do that.
It's already a negative. But he also wrote he wrote a bunch of he was a consulting producer on Discovery, and he just been he did a bunch of TV stuff. So this is his first like actual movie. And I'm like, yo, I don't even know. Yeah, you're right. There's just the bones of it are good, but the execution of it seems like it was haphazard. And it
seems like that's what they were left with. So my guess from watching this is that all of the original Star Trek creators who were initially involved did not return, whether it's because of the strike or just the time pass or whatever it was. So they had to bring all of these people who maybe were like assistant writer, things, and they put them together to make this film. And a good chunk of them really don't know much, if not all. It seems like they got most of their reference from the Section 31 episodes of Discovery, which again, if that's where you start and you've already
got the wrong ideas.
Yeah. So even though, like Josh said, admittedly, those early first two seasons when Section 31 showed up on Discovery, they did a good job of not mangling the continuity or mangling the overall mythology understanding of Section 31. Fast forward to this, the exact opposite. It not only fails to show what Section 31 is or was established, it failed to go beyond that point, and it completely torpedoed any future desire to see more from Section 31. And I think that's tragic because, again, as Cam was pointing out, Section 31 is a good lure for people who might be unfamiliar with Star Trek, but here's a different side of the world. It's like the equivalent to seeing the Mandalorians in Star Wars instead of the Jedi. You same world and sandbox, but from the perspective of a different character type or entity, it typically can work well. But again, this was just done because they could do it. And in a lot of cases that works at least in the middle, but this was just completely.
Yeah. And reading up on it, the writers of this were basically the writers that were making the series. And so it seems like they basically was like, oh, we're going to make the pilot. Oh, and then we're not going to make the pilot anymore. So what we got to do with all this footage? What do you do all this thing? Let's put something together to make it work. And it's, this is, again.
The main story is the Terran Empire planning to invade the Prime Universe. Now, when the hell did that ever was that ever a storyline for the major Star Trek? Yes, they've had times where mirror versions have come over to do different shit, like with Discovery, when Mirror Orca was fleeing and ended up in the Prime Universe. But to have this whole thing where the entirety of the Terran Empire is about to invade the Prime Universe, I mean, I don't know. It could work, but
I was fine with that, because if you establish that something like, something as simple, again, one line of dialogue, you establish something as simple as the Terran Empire has conquered all corners, the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, like they've conquered the known universe of Star Trek. Let's assume that the discovery of the wormhole happens over Bajor the same way it did in Deep Space Nine,
right?
And so that's your entry point to now conquer the Gamma Quadrant.
Essentially, they conquered the Milky Way.
You conquered all of the known Star Trek universe, and the only thing left now is to travel from your universe to that universe and take over that universe. That, to me, if the rest of the elements work, that works. But it doesn't, and they don't establish anything even remotely close to that. Again,
it could work. I'm not arguing against that. I'm saying that narratively, it takes a lot of stretch and it's convoluted, because then you have to ask, at least for me, what's the purpose of conquering this new universe? And then from that, what does that look like? Do you establish a bridge between the two,
right,
so that you're sharing resources and all that stuff?
So you're saying a lot of it. So you're saying a lot of the smart things that Star Trek is known for is there none of this.
No,
yeah, I think, and
that's what we're both saying at the same time.
Part of the reason we like Star Trek is because it's smart, and like it has, like, even if you don't understand Star Trek, you can get in and you get a gist of the lore, what it is, how it is, what the stakes are, what the stakes aren't, and then to have all that. And I think that's the thing where it's almost like they bought. It's almost like they should have just took off Star Trek altogether and then just let it be its own.
100%. If it were just something,
it could work.
It just like what we said about the last 2 seasons of Discovery and a few others, which is if you remove Star Trek from the label and just make this a generic space opera adventure, whatever, it could work. But the problem is you put Star Trek in front of it. So that creates a whole nother expectation for what this is, science, but from a grounded, very human experience. Even the larger concepts usually take on a very human narrative, right? Even if you have an alien entity that's accidentally destroying entire planets, but it's unaware of that. It's like us walking through through dirt, and we kick over an anthill. We might have tried. You might have an asshole human who tried to do that, but for the most part, it's just in their way, and they just kick it over, not really caring that they just destroyed an entire ecosystem, us. So those big to small, micro to macro connections have always been what, to me, has been the best part of Star Trek. And when you lose that, and it's just these blasters and Yeah, exactly. With the Travis blasters and space fights and lasers and all this stuff.
And
you don't have Star Trek anymore. You have Star Wars.
And they tried, and I think they relied on, to piggyback on what D'Angelo was just saying. I think they tried to use the trappings of Star Trek lore in general to try to sell it. Like somebody mentioned the half black, half white alien from Let That Be Your Last Battlefield in the original Trek series. I forget what season. The Lokai. Yeah.
The Lokai.
Let's throw that guy in there. We haven't seen him in any of the post original series stuff. So, yeah, let's throw that in there. Oh,
but strip away why those characters existed to begin with.
He's just there because he's there. You could have thrown literally any alien race in that outfit, in that role, and it wouldn't have mattered. It would have mattered just as little as it did that they used that guy. Rachel Garrett being there makes absolutely zero sense. Like negative zero, like past zero. Like it makes negative sense that any Starfleet officer is there, let alone Rachel Garrett, who's she's from yesterday's Enterprise, captain of the Enterprise C, the Enterprise before the Next Generation.
And Josh, how do they address her, Josh? Oh, Starfleet. Literally, they just call her Starfleet the whole time. And so that even makes us say even louder, why is Rachel Garrett a Starfleet officer there? Yeah. Why is she there?
And it made no sense whatsoever except to call back to some random something. I mean, it's a good placeholder so that it's a good marker so that you know what time period this is happening. It's after original series, just before, I think, like 80 years, something like that, before 60 years, 50 years, whatever it is, before Next Generation. Cool.
Yeah. And it's implied to be right after a few years after Discovery goes to the future, because now, so technically, I believe this will be happening really around the same time as Strange New Worlds, because Pike would be
it's after.
It's after Strange New World?
Yep. Enterprise C is
but we don't see the Enterprise C.
Enterprise B is at the beginning of Generations, which is after 1701. After 1701A, Enterprise B is the very next ship. It's an Excelsior class ship. It's at the beginning of Generations. So Enterprise C is a generation after that, but a generation before Next Generation.
Wait a minute. So that only made
where it's in that one spot in Star Trek lore where they don't really they don't tell you much. There's very spotty information on things that happen around there. They just jump right. It's wide open territory, so you could make anything. And
that made a little sense, but not much. But
no,
my question to that is, I don't remember them establishing that the Enterprise C was the current Enterprise at that time. Garrett is there, but she's not yet the captain of the Enterprise.
Right. It's just before that. Yes. Sorry, I didn't clarify. So yes, it's before she becomes captain. She was a lieutenant in the movie? I don't even remember.
Lieutenant, yeah. She's a lieutenant.
Yeah, so she's a lieutenant. She hasn't made captain yet. So yeah, it's probably like a good 10 years, 15 years before the disappearance of Enterprise C.
So then who's the captain of the Enterprise at that period? Because now I'm curious.
Probably what's his name? Oh, I'm getting rusty. The guy,
the dude after Pike, right?
B is probably still the prevailing ship at the time. And it would be Pike.
No, it'd be Harriman or Zulu.
B. So we're talking. What's his name? John Harriman.
Yeah. Yep. Harriman or Zulu. Those are the two. One of those.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Cool. Yep.
Can I add something real quick before you guys go? I just find it hilarious that D'Angelo, you made a comment. He was like, when you strip it down to lasers, guns, and simple espionage, it's Star Wars. I was like, hey, I like that. But here's the thing.
Oh yeah, nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
I didn't mean that as a negative.
Yeah, no, but it's just funny because from the tone of you guys' discussion, this sounds like you hold Star Trek in a higher regard, which credibly so. It deserves that. And you guys are much harsher, which is also expected because they've never let you down this much with all their Star Trek renditions in a long time. You expect this from Star Wars. So you guys are a little bit more loose and you're like, hey, it's Star Wars. We did it. But the heater passion of you guys like, look, man, we don't accept this lowbrow stuff. We want highbrow stuff.
Like I said, I'm gonna throw y'all episodes to watch, and you're gonna see how seriously the subject matter of Section 31 is taken in its original introduction. When you see that and you compare it against this film, you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like you can't possibly have visited the origins of Section 31 and walked away with, we're gonna make this. There's no way.
And jokingly, I not that I felt attacked, but I felt attacked, but I didn't take it seriously. I was like, hold on, man, I like lasers. I like that.
No, again, you love it. I mean, think about all the stuff that has it. So it's just knowing what you are. And Star Wars for a long time knew what it was.
Yeah.
And
it had an identity. Yeah.
Exactly. And so does Star Trek.
Yeah.
The people who make the best in Star Trek and Star Wars understand the fundamentals of both stories and the origins. George Lucas originally made it to be simply taken in as good versus evil, doing the right thing versus doing the wrong thing. You know, very simple things.
And always ending on hope. Right.
And always ending on hope. Even Empire Strikes Back ends on hope. Even though Vader and the Empire technically won the day, the last image that they leave you with is Luke and Leia looking out on the bright horizon. Right. As they prepare to go after Han. So as long as these creators stick to that paradigm for both Star Wars and Star Trek, Trek being more grounded in relatable science, scientific exploration, and scientific discovery that connects to a sense of this could be the future of humanity, or the opposite could be. We could end up with the Expanse future, where we slowly and very bloodily enter space. And we never get out of those trappings of capitalism and all that stuff. Star Trek is like, you know what? If we just be our best selves, we'll stave off self-annihilation. We'll make it so that the Earth is livable for future human generations and beyond. And not only that, and we'll make friends when we encounter aliens. We will not kill them and take their technology and then go out and use it against them, which is likely what we're doing right now. But that's a whole nother story. But that's Star Trek. And at the end, the two things that they have in common is both are purveyors of hope, and hope through scientific exploration or scientific understanding. Star Wars takes on the more mystical aspect of that conversation, where Star Trek sticks to the science, laws of physics, and all that stuff. They're their best when they stick to those paradigms.
Can I say this real quick? Could you say Star Trek is gone where no Star Trek lore has gone before into the
section? I like where you're going with that. Section. I won't boo you. I give you credit because I like that. Section 31 did take us to a place where no Trek, Discovery almost took us there. But
I'm doing bar mitzvahs.
I feel like that was designed to hurt me.
Yeah, I feel personally attacked.
Well, I got my arm on, so I felt it, and it just made me stronger.
That's
So
but yeah,
with Josh, I'm gonna let you get the final word of this, so we don't beat it to death, and we shall never speak its name again.
I mean, it's the same with the original X-Men animated series. Just carrying on from what we were just talking about. Like when it's done in good faith and it's done with the idea that there are certain pillars that prop up these things. If you stick to those pillars, you can only, if you go wrong, you only go but so wrong. Like it'll still be good. It'll still be faithful. And that's, I think, the thing,
AKA
with
Discovery. Discovery
when Discovery
was bad, but it was still working.
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking, the first two seasons, even third season didn't stray that far in the cut, because you have
introduce something new, and
you have two seasons that you have as the informing context. If you look at it from season 3 on and you completely ignore season 1 and 2, and it's pretty easy to do because they seem to, it pulls further and further away from the established context that they have.
Yeah.
X-Men the animated series started out same way. Like it's certain pillars that make these things work. Good animation and stories that sort of stick to the rules of that world. And I feel like X-Men the animated series didn't do that, which is why X-Men 97 is such a refreshing, just a shocker. It's like like somebody dunked my head in cold water, because they immediately pivot from the beginning. They pivot to the things that absolutely make X-Men work.
And better than the films too. So that added even more to it, because the films were so bad at that.
I was gonna say, and this is me having hated everything X-Men related, with the exception of like First Class and Days of Future Past completely by accident.
And he's our resident X-Men. If there's an expert on X-Men on this panel, it's Josh, in the same way that he's the expert on Star Trek. So if guy
and nothing worked. Like nothing.
If you lose Josh, properly. You lost the plot already.
He told me years ago the only X-Men before 97 that the only X-Men animated show that was worth watching was X-Men and Wolverine and the X-Men.
Yes.
And I watched it, and he was absolutely right. And it was tragic because it was only one season.
I only watched it because Cam was the one who was like, nah, you should give it a shot. And after me saying, no, I refuse. I will not. It took about a year and some change of him going, no, you really should watch. Nah, bro, you should watch. I'm telling you, you should watch. And just staying after me anytime the subject came up. And finally, I was like, I've watched everything that I think I intend to watch. I don't have anything to watch right now. Cam, what should I watch? He was like, you should watch X-Men, Wolverine and X-Men, like I told you like 2 years ago. All right, fine, no problem. It didn't come out like that. I just received it like that because Cam doesn't talk. And I watched it, and immediately, like I could not watch anything else. It grabbed me and it held me, and I blew straight through that thing. And it was in the same storytelling mold as Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes. They blow through story really quick, but it works. And the way that they tell the story works, and it's not as blatantly apparent that it's Wolverine centric because it's Wolverine and the X-Men. It's pretty spread. The plot is pretty spread out amongst all the players. It's just that Wolverine happens to be the one leading the X-Men at the time, and that's it. And
I think that's the thing with like all the Star Trek stuff that they do well is that where it's like they have good plot. It's steeped in science and it respects the lore. There's tons of stuff to play around with.
It's about the humanity of the crew and the characters that are involved. Because that was largely the problem with Discovery, is that they did not take time to develop the characters and give us a reason to care about them. Deep Space Nine, Next Generation, the original series, Voyager, which probably out of those four was the one that I always struggled with watching. But
Enterprise.
I didn't even make it past.
I haven't finished
the second season.
To this day, how long has it been? And I have not finished Enterprise.
I've watched
even
it.
I watched the finale because someone told me what the finale was. They said it was both lazy, but it was still fun because it was Riker reviewing archive footage of Arthur. So I thought that was cool, and so I watched it. But everything else, I did not watch at all.
That debuted in 2001.
I remember, because it was like 2 years after Voyager went off the air. And then they started talk about that reset. Because remember, at first they only called it Enterprise, and Star Trek fans were like, no. Like, no. You cut the orchestra main theme for some pop BS, and you want to call it Enterprise?
That is a regular refrain. Shout out to my homie Chester, a friend of the pod, and that is his constant refrain when you mention and it's like it wounds him fresh every time it comes up. He's like, and another thing, they really just completely nerfed that theme song. Who wanted that? Whose idea was that? Why would you? It's a space opera. Why would you pivot away from an orchestral opening?
You go from horns and like big percussive and string to do 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 do. I'm like, what is this?
Whose idea was that?
It's also crazy how expensive. Well, you know what? I'm going to stop it, because if we don't, we're going to be here for another 3 hours.
Yeah.
So to wrap all of this up, Captain America, see it on Disney Plus. Section 31, don't see it.
Don't see it at all.
Section 31, if you are a Trek fan out there and you haven't seen it, pretend as hard as you can that it does not exist. And as long as you tell yourself that it doesn't exist in none of Trek reality, not even in Enterprise, because we can accept Enterprise, but Section 31, no,
I might actually watch Discovery's final season instead of Section 31 instead.
I would say that's
not bad.
It's serviceable by comparison, and at the end of the day, you should watch Michael Burnham's the closing of her narrative arc. I mean, 100%. Of all the things that I disliked about Discovery post season 3, she remained a constant in terms of the way she was written and the way that Sonequa Martin Green approached the role. So I can have nothing but good things to say about that. So in that regard, it's worth checking out those last 10
and it's actually
episodes.
It's not season 3 or 4. Like it's not.
It's serviceable. It's very passable. Yeah,
but season 4 being the lowest low of the low points, it's not that. It's not even.
They step up to end it in a good way.
It's at least as good as season 3.
All right,
can I say something?
Close us out, Cam. Close us out.
To all those upset Star Trek fans, excuse me. I want you guys to live long and prosper and breathe. Okay.
That's cool. What are you doing today, man? What is happening today? That's
and you know what? With that, we're gonna end this. This is Blerdlines. Thanks for listening, and we are out.
I couldn't help myself.